Well, here we are. It is week one of the Oregon Ducks football season. Got the home opener coming up on Saturday against Fresno State. And today we got a huge chunk of news. Ducks releasing the week one organizational chart, not a depth chart. It's an organizational chart, which just kind of goes to show you that it's a lot of moving pieces. Competitions are still being battled throughout the whole week here in Eugene. Wanted to get the team on here and give some of our thoughts. Got Nick Batty and Dylan Rubenking. So yeah, guys, let's just break this down and talk about some surprises, some things that caught our eye. What are we feeling?
Yeah, I think overall.
Go ahead.
I think overall, I wasn't super surprised with what I was seeing on the organizational chart, especially on the top. There were a couple areas like the will linebacker. I was a bit surprised that Justin Flo isn't the outright guy. We were talking about that a little bit. Drew Mathis, I know, has that experience, and he's been around college football for a while. So I guess that kind of makes sense. But I figured Justin Flo was not necessarily running away with the position, but I thought he had it in the bag. And then at safety in cornerback, with DJ James and Jamal Hill not being able to play, I was really interested to see how that was going to turn out. So Bennett Williams takes that star kind of nickel position, and Steve Stevens gets the back safety. So, and then that battle between Triquez and Dante is interesting as well. That hasn't been decided.
Yeah, you can go for it, Nick. I know you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, on the offensive end of things, I just thought it was really interesting that Troy Franklin just straight out won the wide receiver spot. I mean, for a true freshman to come in, even though he was here in the spring, to beat out, Devin Williams, who we might add was pretty limited this fall, but even still, it's very impressive for a true freshman, even one of his caliber, to win the starting job straight out of this true freshman season. And then also Micah Pittman, Jalen Redd, both co-starters at the H wide receiver position. That's, I don't know if it's too surprising. They're both really good players who have played here multiple years. So I think it's they're both always going to see the field a fair amount, but still interesting that they're going to be splitting time pretty evenly probably there. And also the wide tight end, you have the true freshman Maliki Manavao, and then DJ Johnson, who played a lot last year, and then Cam McCormick, who, of course, we all know his story, hasn't really played since week 1, 2018. So with all of them, being co-starters and maybe all seeing playing time, or at least, probably two of them, it's really interesting to see the mix of guys, so that's kind of what really stood out to me on this offensive end. Of course, the backup quarterback as well. We've all got, Ty, Jay, and Robbie all splitting time still for the backup spot. Sounds like Mario Cristobal said we should get clarity on that sometime this week before the game. But it is still interesting to see Ty Thompson be second behind Anthony Brown on this list, even though they do have the OR on there as well.
Yeah, there's a lot to get into with what you guys just said. So I'm gonna try to keep it. Maybe we can focus on a position group or maybe a particular set of guys, just so we're not too all over the place. I liked Dylan's point about Justin Flo and Drew Mathis. I think that was kind of one that caught me by surprise. Just as far as Flo not being an outright starter for the Ducks, just with the plays that he made in the spring game and kind of the depth that's there. I think that, Drew Mathis has the experience, but they haven't had a talent like Flo for a little bit here. And just the opportunity to have him and Sewell next to each other, finally coming to fruition after, the hype built up when they were incoming recruits in the 2020 class. I think even though we see that we're there, it's pretty likely that we will see, Flo getting a lot of snaps this year alongside Sewell.
Yeah, I think, with Flo, you saw the highlights coming into his, recruitment. He's throwing dudes around, making huge hits, bone-crushing hits at that. So, the hype was definitely there. And, he had all the attention, all the teams that were recruiting him. And, people just kind of figured he'd be a shoo-in at that starting will linebacker position. And it sounds like he's come along really well since missing most of his freshman year, having a really good camp and developing really well in Tim DeRuyter's defense. But I figured Justin Flo is probably going to be probably shared that with somebody. I kind of I'm not surprised, but I am that it's Drew Mathis. I kind of thought maybe Keith Brown would be the guy that would be the number two, I guess. But Drew Mathis does have that experience, like we talked about. But I do expect Justin Flo to be the number one guy probably in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and then to go to Nick's point, we had a lot of cool stuff on the offense. We had Troy Franklin named an outright starter, which I thought was pretty expected that he'd be in the mix here early on. Maybe not in the outright sense, but the fact that he is in the mix here just shows you maybe how much the staff believes that he's really further along in his development. And after you see him play in the spring game, and just the way that he's drumming up a bunch of buzz in fall camp with these explosive plays. I thought it was really interesting when we got to talk to Brian McClendon last week, and he was talking about his production chart and kind of how he is laying criteria out and tracking all sorts of characteristics with his guys to see who is going to ultimately get the playing time. That was what he was saying. The most productive guys are going to be on the field the most. And I think that that's an interesting point, because when you're looking at the Ducks wide receiver room, you have all these vets like Pittman, Red, Johnny Johnson, guys that have been here for a while, and then all these talented freshmen coming in. It's kind of put you in a weird spot as a coach, because these guys have all done it for Oregon. They've put it on the field, but you have these young guys that are coming in, and that's where I think the production chart is really coming in to help McClendon and his staff figure out kind of the hierarchy here at wide receiver. And man, it's exciting to see Franklin up there with the ones.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't say enough about what we've seen from him so far in the limited time the media's, been able to go to these practices. But in the one scrimmage we were able to see, he showed flashes of why he is an outright starter. I mean, just his size, strength, athleticism out there is like a man among boys at times. And, I just really can't wait to see how he does this season against the college competition, especially Ohio State when he's playing against the very best. So I feel like, it's definitely a very exciting move, and probably gives the best chance for Oregon to compete early in the year, even though he is a true freshman. Just the talents, the sky's the limit for him.
Dylan, do you have anything you wanted to add there? I don't want to dominate the conversation too much, but I feel like we got a good flow going as far as everyone kind of getting involved here.
Yeah, I really like Troy Franklin. I remember in spring, some of the veterans like you were talking about with Jalen Red and Johnny Johnson. I remember Johnny Johnson saying that him and Dante Thornton's hands were second to none, and that Franklin wasn't dropping anything. So I'm not really surprised to see him there, but I am surprised that Devin Williams is deeper down on the organizational chart than I thought, given how, he didn't have a lot of receptions last year, but when he did, he was a huge piece of that offense, like the UCLA game. He was huge in that game, and he's such a big target as well at 6'5". I really expected him to be a starter, probably be in that, maybe probably actually the X spot. I kind of expected him to be a starter there. I love Franklin. I think he's probably the most talented freshman pass catcher on the team. But I do think Devin Williams, he could be one of the biggest playmakers in the Pac-12. I mean, I think he had 18 or 19 yards a catch last year. I think he had less than 20 receptions, but I think he's a big weapon for the Ducks. And obviously he'll be in the rotation, obviously on the field. But, I'd like to see Franklin get out there and, get his hands dirty and be out there against a Fresno State team that doesn't really have a really, great secondary, great pass defense. So I'm excited to see him get turn loose a little bit.
Yeah, and we're seeing some position battles that still have yet to be decided, like that boundary corner. I think is the one that people are really zoned in on with the defense between Triquez, Bridges, and Dante Manning. I think either way that one shakes out. It looks like the whoever is cornerback 3 doesn't win the battle there is still going to get some pretty significant time. I think that it's interesting to kind of see what Triquez Bridges brings to the table with the longer defensive back and just giving the Ducks some more options there when it comes to matching up with bigger wideouts. I'm trying to think of what other matchups kind of stand out here, or kind of give us a little bit something to talk about. I know we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but we're looking at the secondary. Yeah, Nick, you want to say something?
Yeah, well, one other thing I thought was interesting, and Mario Cristobal touched on it a little bit in his media availability earlier today, but the offensive line, all 5 starters from last year are back, being the starters. Of course, right tackle, we have a little bit of competition there, but even still, he did mention that there was a lot of competition, like Jackson Powers Johnson at center, Marcus Harper. They both had great camps, but at the end, they felt like the 5 that were there last year, that experience coming back, they really liked how that looked. So I am always very confident in the offensive line, especially the cohesiveness of everyone coming back and all that. But I definitely think they're in a good spot there, even with no one else kind of making that jump to start right away.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And, I believe it was Joe Moorhead that was talking about how, 2019 team, they went from being the most experienced offensive line in the country and having all those NFL guys to, in 2020, having one of the least experienced offensive lines in the country. And now they're expected to be one of the best units again in the Pac-12. I wasn't surprised by that kind of 6-man rotation that was up in the start of the organizational chart. But I'm really excited to see some of the depth, because last year you didn't really get to see any of it. Guys like Dawson Jaramillo, Cristobal, I believe, was talking about how he's playing at so many different positions. Marcus Harper, too. And then you have guys like Jackson Powers Johnson and Felipe Lalulu, and even Jalen Jeffers. Those guys have really been impressive as well, and big, huge physical guys that, played really well in high school and were recruited pretty early. I think most of them came on campus pretty early. So I'm really excited to see some depth, more than those 6 veteran guys. Obviously, those guys are, going to be the beef of the offensive line and going to anchor that offensive line. But, in some of those games, like the Stony Brook and the Arizona games, maybe the Colorado this year, I kind of expect to see, some new faces on the offensive line and see what they're capable of.
We're seeing it with the running backs, just how there's such a big wealth of talent. And it's kind of the challenge of getting these guys snaps, right? And I feel like we're kind of seeing that carry over a little bit with the offensive line. The more that I think about it, with Cristobal and Mirabal talking up so many of these young guys. Cristobal is saying that we're playing our best football with Marcus Harper. So maybe he's a guy that's really pushing the envelope here. He's a guy who started snapping the ball a little bit recently, so he'll be someone to watch for sure. And then just because I mentioned running backs, it looks like we got a little bit of clarity on the number 3 job. Trey Benson is slated to more or less be the number 3 guy, with Verdell and Dye being co-starters. But I think that one may be the most, open for change out of potentially any of the position groups that we see here today.
Yeah, well, Byron Cardwell and Seven McGee are still oars with Trey technically, but it does seem like Trey Benson is the most prepared, even coming off that injury, to be that third back. And, of course, Verdell and Dye have shown that they're not always the most durable backs. So it's definitely possible that, one of those guys could be thrown into action. So, we'll just have to wait and see on that, about how ready they really are. Obviously, Sean Dollars not being ready until at least mid-season is going to be a big loss. But until then, I feel like they have enough running back depth to survive until then.
Yeah, and there's definitely, you have Cross Patton and Aaron Smith, who are walk-ons, that are behind them as well. I don't know how much action they'll see. Like you said, it kind of depends on the durability of Verdell and Dye. Verdell kind of has that history a little bit, but he is healthy. Trey Benson's coming off of an injury in spring. It sounds like he's about 99%, I believe, is what Coach Cristobal said. So, I expect a lot of, different bodies, different series. Like one series you'll say Verdell, another you'll say Dye, maybe another you'll say Benson and some of the other guys. So that running back room is going to be really fun to watch because Verdell might be pretty sure in his last season at Oregon, and then Dye might take off after that. And you guys, in the middle of the year, you'll have Sean Dollars, who a lot of Oregon fans are really excited to see, and Trey Benson as well. So it's going to be a really dynamic running room, I think. And I know they're going to be throwing the ball to the running backs a lot too. So that's going to be a really fun dynamic, kind of bringing it back to what Joe Moorhead did at Penn State and a little bit at Mississippi State as well.
And then jumping over to the defensive side, one of the guys that I wanted to make sure to talk about is Bennett Williams. He's getting the starting job there at the star position. He's looking pretty solidified there. I'm excited because I feel like this is a guy who should have been on the field a whole lot more in 2020. Has a wealth of experience at a couple different stops. Is just really, really dynamic. Cristobal today, I believe, was talking about his coverage skills and how much those have improved here in fall camp. And the dude's a hard hitter for sure. And they definitely want to make sure that he's on the field to give them the best shot, whether it be defense or special teams. But I'm excited to see that he's looking like he's going to get some more time. And then I think, Dylan, we were talking about this a little bit before I think we hit record. The fact that Brandon Dorless is listed as a defensive end, I think that was pretty interesting, seeing how he's had more of an interior presence in the past couple seasons.
Yeah, for sure. And I think he's a really versatile athletic guy, kind of like what we were talking about. So I feel like he could have played either. And I was kind of surprised that Braden Swinson isn't back there on the defensive end side. I know he kind of plays a little bit more of, kind of that Sam backer position. But I know he was talking about playing more up front as well. The Tim DeRitter defense, you kind of see guys up front drop back as well. So I think it's going to be a really interesting defensive front seven to watch, who stays up front, who kind of drops back. But the defensive middle, I'm really excited to see guys like Keon Ware-Hudson and Christian Williams and Popo Amave kind of take over the reins from Jordan Scott and Austin Foley, who have been starters for so long. They're a really athletic bunch of defensive tackles. I think this is going to be a really fun group to watch. Hopefully that run defense improves, because last year that was kind of the struggle that they had last year. But I expect that to be better. But they're definitely going to be tested early against Ronnie Rivers and Fresno State and all those guys at Ohio State as well. And the Pac-12 has a bunch of really good running backs as well. But I think it's going to be a really fun group to watch, really athletic group, which might be different from last year, the last couple of years. But Dorless, I want to see where he kind of ends up, finds his niche in the season.
Yeah. So we'll have to keep an eye on the defensive line and kind of how that shakes out. I'm also interested to see how the secondary shakes out with that battle at corner, and then as well when Jamal Hill and DJ James are available for games again. For those of you that missed the update, they are back practicing with the team and have been reinstated, but will not be available for the Week 1 game against Fresno State. Hence why we don't see them here on the depth chart or organizational chart. Excuse me. Steve Stevens, though, it looks like he's taken the job there at the other safety spot. He's a guy that we got to talk to here in fall camp, who was asked about having Javon Holland in the league, and after coming in with him at Oregon, Javon didn't, he only played 2 seasons, and that was enough for him to play himself to a good position in the NFL draft. But Stevens talking about how it's his time now, and he feels like he's ready to take that leap. He and Verone McKinley hang out all the time off the field, so that they have that chemistry, that strong communication. But we're getting some questions answered, at least some kind of clarity here with this Week 1 organizational chart. Touched on a lot of great stuff here, guys. Is there anything else that we maybe didn't get to spend as much time on, or that you think is worth a mention before we hop out of here?
Well, Nick, I know you were talking a little bit about the tight ends.
Yeah. Well, I already touched on it at the beginning, but I thought it was really, really interesting to see Maliki, be on par with DJ Johnson and Cam McCormick. Obviously, Cam, he hasn't played in years, but DJ Johnson, he was a major contributor last year, and for Maliki to come right in and challenge him for a job was really interesting. And also the special teams, I know Dylan has something to talk about with the kicking competition there, but it was cool to see Mikael Wright is going to be back doing kickoffs. and then Micah Pittman and Seven McGee as the new punt returners. So just some cool stuff there. You know, those things change more often than the others. So it's always good to keep tabs on the special teams and what all is going on there.
Yeah, the special teams was something that slipped my mind at first. Thank you for reminding me of that. Um, last year Camden Lewis really struggled. Henry Cattleman came on, and it was like it was kind of his job at the end of the year. So I think most people are really surprised. I think this was kind of the biggest surprise that I've seen for most people on Twitter is that that Camden Lewis and Henry Cattleman are kind of the co-starters at kicker, and that Camden Lewis is the kickoff guy. That's kind of normal. He was last year as well. But Henry Cattleman was perfect last year, made all of his field goals, all of his extra points. The guy was a machine. So I'm really surprised that he's not the runaway guy here because Camden Lewis has had his struggles. Of course, he hit the game winner in 2019 against Washington State, and the crowd ran onto the field and all that good stuff, carried him off and all that. That was fun. But, he did have his struggles, and Henry Cattleman had a great year last year. So I think Henry Cattleman will end up with the job because Camden Lewis, from what I've read, he's a really good practice kicker, but on the field it definitely changes. So, I look forward to see Henry Cattleman being the guy at kicker because he was dynamic last year.
Yeah, and Mark Cristobal even mentioned today that Camden has really looked good in practice and has really pushed Henry Cattleman. And I remember, I think the second scrimmage, which was not one that we were able to see, but we heard from the university that Camden made a 50-yarder, which is not something we've even come close to seeing in a game. So, it's a lot of that practice versus game rep balance that they're probably having to cipher through right now.
I think a good note to end it on here has to do with the freshman class. This 2021 recruiting class goes down as the best class in program history, and we're seeing some of the fruits of the heavy recruiting, the elite recruiting, just in this first organizational chart, really across the board. If we can't put too much weight, I feel like, in Ty Thompson being the number 2 quarterback right now with Cristobal saying that's a battle that's still shaking out. But particularly at the tight ends with Ferguson and Montevau, they're right there as far as their slots go. Troy Franklin starting at wide receiver, and Dante Thornton's right on the heels of Johnny Johnson. Maybe expected to see Isaiah Brevard a little bit higher, but he did come in late. Kingsley Suamataya is out there. Jackson Powers Johnson's making some noise, has been making some noise through all of camp. And then, on the defensive line, maybe not as much. Keanu Williams is listed there in the 3 deep. Justin Flo is he's a 2020 guy, so let's not count him. Keith Brown, though, and then Jeffrey Bossa as well, and then Avante Dickerson and Darren Barkins. So we'll see how much of a role some of these guys have. Obviously, different guys are in a better position than others to have some significant snaps here. But definitely some real exciting stuff to get into as we near the season here officially in Eugene, kicking off on Saturday. But that's all we had for this one. We'll have to see what the Ducks have in store for Fresno State come Saturday.